everyone, welcome back to Simming History, where we look at the history of architecture through the lens of the Sims. Before we get started today, we just hit 100 subscribers. So thank you everyone, and if you haven't yet, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Today, in the fourth and final episode in a series on ancient Egypt, we are looking at the Temple of Karnak, the Temple of Ramses II, and the end of the Egyptian Empire, but mainly the Temple of Karnak. So let's get started. The Temple of Karnak, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was begun around 1550 BCE, around the same time as the start of the first dynasty of the New Kingdom, the 18th dynasty, the same dynasty of Queen Hatshepsut. It was dedicated to the god Amun, Egypt's high god responsible for the rising of the sun every day and the flooding of the river Nile every year, which was necessary for agriculture. Inside the temple, a statue of Amun was washed, dressed, offered the best food and wine, and was entertained daily. And he was so important that nearly every single pharaoh in the New Kingdom poured money into huge expansions at Karnak. The result was the largest religious complex in the ancient world and included a sacred pool, multiple hypostyle halls, multiple temples to both pharaohs and other gods, multiple courtyards, and multiple pylons, which were large gates leading into the Temple of Amun at Karnak, and also off to the side to the neighboring Temple of Luxor. Hypostyle halls were huge rooms whose roofs sat on rows upon rows of columns. At Karnak, we are introduced at last to an iconic element of Egyptian architecture, the lotus and palm columns of Egypt. Lotus columns look like, well, closed lotus beds, and palm columns look like open palm fronds. And like every other Egyptian architecture, the surfaces of the walls, columns, beams, and even ceilings were all carved with sunk reliefs and then painted. So although today it looks like just plain stone, in the time of ancient Egypt, they were all very brightly colored. And although nearly every pharaoh invested heavily in the Temple of Karnak, there was one major disruption in the life of Karnak, with the pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who ruled from about 1352 to 1336 BCE. 5 years into his reign, everything changed. He declared a new monotheistic religion, worshipping the sun disk god Aten. He closed Karnak, changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, moved the capital from Thebes to a brand new city, which was built at great expense, eventually bankrupting the government. And this change was hugely unpopular amongst, well, basically everyone outside of the royal family, as the people of Egypt did not appear to abandon their former pantheon, and other issues of Egyptian government and culture were basically neglected by Akhenaten during this period, which became known as the Amarna period. Akhenaten may have been temporarily succeeded either during the last years of his life or immediately after his death by either one of his children and or his wife, Nefertiti. Eventually, he was succeeded by his son, Tutenaten, and during his reign, the old faith was returned. The capital was moved back to Thebes and the new capital abandoned, and Karnak was reopened. To show his devotion to Amun, Tutenaten changed his name to Tutankhamun, known today as King Tut. His tomb, found in the 1920s, was nearly intact with his full funerary trappings. But were they actually his? Modern studies have suggested two possibilities for the origins of his tomb's belongings, or more likely a mix of both. King Tut ruled for only about 10 years and died relatively young, and he wouldn't really have had time to acquire his own full set of furnishings for the afterlife, and they may have needed to be sourced elsewhere. And they're fairly certain that it was sourced from his father and stepmother. His gold mask displayed pierced ears, something only shown on female masks of that time, so it's believed that that mask may have actually belonged to Nefertiti. His chair or throne had a relief carving showing a royal couple that had clearly been altered to depict him and his wife, but because of its use of the sun disk god Aten, it was more likely Akhenaten and his queen Nefertiti. His tomb allotted the priests of Karnak a chance to literally dispose of everything remaining from the Amun period, and they took advantage of that. After Tut, things returned to relative normal in the New Kingdom, and constructions of additions at Karnak continued. Today, I'm limiting my build to just the second pylon in the Great Hypostyle Hall, as it would have been in the reign of Ramses II, the third pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. Ramses II was responsible for building a great wall that surrounded the oldest part of the temple, where the god Amun actually lived, as well as the Great Hypostyle Hall and the second pylon. Ramses is also regarded as the greatest of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, and he was a prolific builder, among other things. Along with his constructions at Karnak, he's also very well known for his temple at Abu Simbel. Here we are in luck, because although we usually build in Sims 4, in Sims 3, there actually is an Abu Simbel temple. The real Abu Simbel is a rock-cut temple, so it's cut right into the cliff. And it's recognizable for its 4 huge statues of Ramses II, with smaller statues depicting family members around his legs. These family members included, among others, his queen, Nefertari. The extreme height difference was supposed to evoke the beyond human strength and power of the pharaoh compared to those around him. The temple as it stands today is not actually standing in its original location. It was moved in its entirety in 1967, and a new cliff was built around it. This move was a result of an impending flooding from the creation of Lake Nessar, caused by the construction of the Aswan High Dam. This move was also overseen by UNESCO, because just like Karnak, the temple at Abu Simbel is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. After 3 dynasties and 500 years of rule, the New Kingdom came to an end, around 1077 BCE. It was then followed by what's referred to as the Third Intermediate Period, where Egypt once again deunified, and then followed by a period known as the Later Kingdom, where Egypt reunified. During both of these eras, a variety of priests and pharaohs maintained power, the pharaohs coming from both Egyptian and foreign lands. Eventually, they were also replaced by the Greek pharaohs, known as the Ptolemaics. They ruled from 305 BCE to 30 BCE and ended with Cleopatra. The Ptolemaics also added on to Karnak, constructing the final outer courtyard and pylon. So thanks for joining me today as we took a look at the Temple of Karnak in the end of Egypt. You can find me on Instagram at Simming History and at the Sims 4 Gallery, where there are playable versions of many of the builds on this channel. Take a moment to please hit like and subscribe as we keep climbing in that subscriber count. I'll see you all next time. Until then, bye!